Hello and welcome to a workshop for the 19th Annual Green Living Festival. Our festival is coming to you from the Earthway Center of Missouri Botanical Garden, presented by Ameren, and we want to especially thank Spire, our workshop sponsor. I'm Jean Ponzi, and I have the pleasure and privilege today of getting to visit a home in Dogtown with homeowner Dan Berg, and his children Ella and Carlos are going to be joining us a little further on. Actually, we'll be running camera as we get to walk around the house. This is in practice, a passive house, not necessarily certified. It's a very particular kind of very energy efficient, high performance green home. And the Berg family has been living in this house now for 8 years. So 8 years on, how is a passive house performing? How do these features work? What might you be able to incorporate as you're planning a home or home improvements of your own? What have the homeowners learned in that time, and what can we learn from them? Green Living Festival, it's Energy Day, and we are going to be learning a lot about super energy efficiency in the home of the Berg family. Hi, Dan Berg. How are you?
Hi, doing well.
Good. Thank you for having us into your home. What prompted you and your family to want to invest in and do all the special planning for this very high performance kind of house 8 years ago?
We needed a new house because our old house just wasn't big enough when we were having our second child. And so we were looking at different areas we might live in and the school districts. And I had always wanted to live in an environmentally friendly house. And we found a double lot that had a nice southern exposure. And we thought this was a really good opportunity to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. And you are a physician professionally. You work in public health especially. You're very community-minded. You've done a lot of work with and on the board of the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. So those are all things that I know are really important to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I've been working in primary care medicine at family care health centers for the last 11 years.
So let's take a moment and get a PowerPoint presentation up that you have, and you can show us some things in pictures in the house. And then, as I said a little later, we'll actually be able to walk around and see some of the outdoor features.
Sounds good.
So Dan Berg, this is an exterior view of your home. It looks in some ways like a regular home. In some ways, maybe it's stylistically, maybe it's functionally a little bit different. I can see that double lot there. What is a passive house? What literally does that mean that distinguishes it?
A passive house, there's very specific criteria, which there's a slide about it a little later that explains exactly what they are. Talking about energy use, insulation, air movement, and there's a certain number of criteria technically to make a passive house. My personal philosophy, I think that a house that uses very little energy or is net zero or net negative, to me it's more important than passive house exactly, but passive house is a very specific designation. And I like this picture because when we go outside in a little bit, you'll see just how much all the different bushes, trees, and plants have grown in the last 8 years.
Well, and also when we talked to plan this visit to your home, I know you had to be really careful about your landscaping choices. You wanted them to be ecological, but you can't block any of the solar features.
Right. And when we first built the house, it was just all dirt there. And they said, well, what do you want to do with all this dirt? And I had never spent very much time thinking about landscaping. And I happened to run into Doug Tallamy's book about naturescaping, and I really liked it. And so I've been trying to naturescape around the house, which you'll see in a little bit.
We've got some really good naturescaping resources in the Green Living Festival. They will all premiere, ta-da, on Thursday, June 11th, Naturescaping Day, an opportunity to learn more about that. So You, anything you want to add based on what's on this slide, Dan?
Well,
Think you might have,
these are the things that I'm going to talk about. And so there's slides that get into the specifics of what is a passive building, why we decided to build the house, and then we look at slides of the building actually going up.
okie doke. So certifications, you mentioned this is not, like LEED, a green building certification. You didn't really go for that, but there are guidelines, there are standards that define these kinds of buildings.
Right. So our house was based on the passive house standard. But in order to actually get certified, you need to pay someone to come and inspect it. And we didn't really see why, because there wasn't really an incentive for us to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We really just wanted something that was environmentally friendly.
Well, and one of the things I see here that's different about passive house maybe goes a little further than the energy standards of the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED rating system, which use Energy Star as their baseline, is that, more performance, perhaps more testing and evaluation after the energy systems and the house is built, and then cutting the energy use 90% compared to conventional construction. That's a big deal. And that this could be applied to buildings in addition to homes.
Right. Yeah, I think the main difference is that passive house, it's more of a standard based on energy use and air movement. And then LEED, it's a more complicated thing with various different categories, and you can get points for this and points for that, and they add up the different points, and it might not be quite as energy efficient as a passive house.
Mm-hmm. So here's the energy pie here. This is energy use in general, right? Here we are in the building sector.
Right. So buildings use a lot of energy, and we can save a very significant amount of energy if people make more efficient buildings.
And then the requirements, strict requirements for passive house standards.
Right. So you'll see that one of the big things is to have an airtight building shell, very little air exchanges, which most houses breathe more, but a passive house does not, which means that you need to actively move air through the house, and it runs through an energy conservation air handler.
And you would be very aware of that, because if, I know one of the big things that happens when buildings get really energy efficient, pollutants can get concentrated in the house. You have to watch what you clean with, and you have to be aware of air exchanges and actually have mechanical enhancements for that, right?
Right. So, right. If you don't have enough air exchange, then you can get mold in the house. And then also, like you said, you can get like a smell, would make it smell bad for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you want me to show a picture right now, but we have, there's an air handler under the staircase, which pulls in air from the outside, and then it goes through an energy exchanger. Mm-hmm. And then it blows out fresh air from outside, but it saves 90% of the energy. It saves 90% of the heat and humidity or the, depending whether it's summer or winter, either the coolness or the heat that's in the house. I don't know. Do you want?
Yes.
Do you want me to show you that?
Let's hang on it.
Okay.
Oh, so this is
this is it. And these tubes. So there's a tube. So this tube goes outside, and it's bringing in fresh air to this machine.
Uh-huh.
And then there's an air exchanger inside that machine. And then the fresh air that's brought in goes out to this other tube into the HVAC system.
Do you have to have special filters for a piece of equipment like that?
Yeah, there's washable filters inside of the, actually it's about due to be washed. I've been meaning to do that the last couple of weeks.
So Dan, good thinking there that there are reusable filters. How often do you have to change them?
So well, we don't actually change them, but I just wash them
Yeah.
every 6 months.
Hmm.
And I just have to pull them out. They're like little pie slices, and I pull them out and then like hit them on the wall to get all the dust out, and then wash them with water and then put them back in.
Okie dokie. Good to know. Okay, let's go on here in your presentation. Advantages to this kind of building.
So this is a picture of a passive house that is still standing while all the rest of the houses got knocked down in a tornado. And it's because of the insulated concrete forms. So our house is built with insulated concrete forms. And so it's not stick and frame like most houses. It's basically concrete walls.
Mm-hmm. And I know we'll get to see some photos of that from when it was under construction. Heating and cooling costs. When you look at a chart like this, my hunch is this might be like, national averages, or not necessarily just for St. Louis, but significant difference between a passive house and a code home.
Right. So our costs are actually probably lower than this because, well, I saw that Spire is one of the sponsors, but we were able to get rid of Spire completely. We have no gas. And so there's no gas bill at all. And then for our electric bill, we have no electric bill from April through October. And then we have some electric bill November, December, January, February, March.
No electric bill during the cooling season, the hot summer of St. Louis?
Right, because we're making a lot of solar power.
Wow. Okay, well, we'll get to this. And holy camoles, look at the difference between these code home bars, high bars, and then the almost, just barely visible bars for a passive house in this graph.
Yeah, it's a big difference.
So here we are, 8 years ago, maybe a little longer ago. You're thinking about why you wanted to do it.
Right. Our house was too small. There's a lot of small houses in Dogtown. Carlos is a fetus in this picture. And there just was not room for another person in our house.
Yeah, Dogtown in South St. Louis, it's a neighborhood in the city of St. Louis. That's a pretty small house area. Those houses were built, a lot of that was developed around the 1904 World's Fair, and there were a lot of working class people in that neighborhood. That is not an area of McMansions, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of diversity in the housing here. So there's a lot of small houses, and there are a lot of big houses too. Like we're not actually even the biggest house on our block, but it's a real mix of housing.
And I think, is your wife holding parts of the insulated concrete form structure there?
Yeah, so that's a little piece of plastic that holds the two sides of the styrofoam together when they're pouring the concrete in.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be some more pictures of that.
I know, those are fun to see. So here you are in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah, you can see the double lot right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And it had just been vacant for many years.
Were you able to take advantage of any, because it was vacant land, were you able to take advantage of any incentives from the city of St. Louis to get those lots?
To get the land, no.
Okay.
No. There was, and I think this is changing now, but I don't think this is necessarily good public policy, but basically any time that people are building something new, they get a few years of tax abatement in the city. Mm-hmm. And so I think we've got like 3 years of tax abatement or something like that.
Will we, by any chance, will we see this kind of an aerial view later in the show, Dan, or in the slideshow with your house on that lot so we can see what it looks like now?
No. Kind of oddly, our house didn't show up on Google Maps for like years. I don't even know if it's on there now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to send another car around to do street view or aerial surveys or whatever. That only happens every so often. So here's some shout outs to the folks that worked on your house. Yes?
Yes. So this is Ralph Wafer, and I had known Ralph from the Coalition for the Environment. He's an architect. And so he designed our house.
Ralph Wafer was a really early adopter of green building practices. Ralph was the architect for the Earthways home, which my team, the Earthways Center at the Missouri Botanical Garden, worked in for the last 10 years of that building's life. It was a Victorian house that had been built in 1885 in the city, and it was renovated in 1992, 92, 94. Ralph did the design to demonstrate green in the context of an actual home, early 90s. And then our group moved in there in 2000, and we worked in there from 2000 until 2010 when the lease skyrocketed. And also by that time, you could see the things that were in that house out in mainstream. They had become mainstream, whereas before that, people, couldn't really see them. So Ralph Wafer, a pioneer, early champion.
Yeah, great guy. This is Gary. So Ralph introduced us to Gary, and Gary is, I think he's a physicist, but just an all-around smart guy, and he's very familiar with the different technologies and figuring out how window size and where the windows are placed and how the air movement works, how that all works together, and how much energy somebody, doing energy modeling, figuring out how much energy is going to be needed.
Mm-hmm. Gary Steps has been a participant in the Green Living Festival in the past. Butterfly Energy Works, another early adopter and very ardent champion of these kinds of building principles.
This is Anthony Garavaglia. He's done a lot of work on making green buildings. He actually has a really interesting building himself where he converted a schoolhouse into a green friendly building with ground source heat pumps, and he's a really nice guy and did an excellent job.
Mm-hmm. Aha, floor plan.
Yes. So interestingly, this was not our original floor plan. Our original floor plan, when we went to the builder, it was very expensive, and then we had to completely rework it. And so in designing the house, we realized we needed to design it together with a builder to get an idea of what things cost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is the floor plan that we actually used.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms?
So we made it so that each of the children would have their own bedroom, and we would have a bedroom, and then we had a bedroom for my in-laws for when they stay in St. Louis with us.
Uh-huh. And did you also build in workspaces, home office space, or?
So we have 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms.
Uh-huh. Are they all full baths or any of it half baths?
Yeah, no, they're all full baths.
And is this all on one level? Do you have a lower level living space or upper level living space?
There's a second floor. There's no basement. It turns out that building a basement new is very expensive, and it saves a lot of money to build a second floor instead of a basement.
Yeah, but then where do you put all your stuff, Dan Berg?
Well, that's the tricky thing. So we do have a lot of shelving.
And then your utility rooms, your equipment spaces, those must be somewhere on the ground floor, yes?
We have a shed outside for like outdoor equipment, and then we have a laundry room where I keep like tools and things like that also. You can see yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, the laundry room is the one that's got all the I can't really show you because you can't see where I'm pointing, but
yeah. Oh,
anyway.
Here it is. I can see it. Utility and laundry over here on this side.
Right.
All right. And then elevation.
Yeah, so this is like if you cut the house in half and look at it from the side. Mm-hmm. And with a passive house, it's very important that you have a southern exposure because the house is heating itself in the winter. And I can show you more when we do the outside walk around.
Okie dokie. Oh, now we get to a really fun part. Now we start getting into the construction, that insulated concrete form construction.
Right, and these are the guys who did it. Greg Sweats has a lot of experience actually building with this, and then he had a crew of workers. And so here they are. You can see that there's styrofoam walls, and then they come in with like a crane and a cement truck and pour the cement right into the into the styrofoam. It's like an Oreo cookie with the styrofoam being the cookie part, and then the cement is the stuff in the middle.
This is a pretty good use for styrofoam. This is better than single-use coffee cups, I think. Because it's material that is not going to degrade for millennia, and you can't probably not very much building waste with these. Are like big Lego blocks, right? These big insulated concrete form blocks.
Yes.
And then they're
Right.
an excellent insulating material. That's why we use this stuff for keeping beverages hot, and it stays there.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully people live in this house for a long time.
Yeah.
You know,
Another
I
shot
think
of,
this house is going to last. This house is going to last a long time.
so here we're seeing the footings and then starting to put in some of the functionality. Yeah.
Something amazing. When they built it, they put in all of the runners for the electric and the water before the house was built. So they had set up some siding equipment and then ran all the pipes in while it was still just dirt on the ground.
Huh.
And so they went off the blueprints and just knew where everything was going to be.
You better have figured out where you wanted your outlets, huh?
Right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing how they planned it all out properly ahead of time, because now all those runners and stuff are under the cement floor.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then what's happening here?
So then after they had put all of those plastic runners, they put down insulation. So our floors are insulated, and in most houses, like in a basement, the floors are not insulated. But in a very efficient house, it's worthwhile to have insulation on the floors, because the ground stays at 55 degrees. So if you're trying to heat your house, you don't want to necessarily heat all of the ground up. Like if my wife likes to keep the house at 72 degrees, like that means we'd have to heat all of the ground around us at 72 degrees too. And if it's insulated, then you don't.
Dan Berg,
So there's insulation
I'm sorry.
around
Go ahead.
and around it. That's all.
Are there any moisture barriers under all this pink board insulation? We have a very humid climate here. We have a lot of, potential for moisture seeping up through the ground. I'm thinking about the concrete floor of my own basement. What protects the flooring of your house with no basement from that kind of moisture seepage?
Well, I'm not totally sure. There is about 6 inches of gravel. So first there's dirt, then there's 6 inches of gravel, and then there's the insulation, that pink insulation board, which is fairly thick. I mean, it's a couple inches thick, and that's all taped, and then there's cement poured over that. And then the landscaping too. I mean, we are above grade, so there's not water. Our house is a little higher than the ground around us.
And
we have no basement.
You said that. I know that really gave me pause.
So because if you look at where the floor is, it's a couple feet up from the ground.
And there's Ella. Hopefully we'll see Ella now.
Yeah, she's a lot older now.
Yeah, running the camera when we do our walk around.
Yeah,
going up.
So yeah, here the walls. It's pretty awesome to watch.
So there's a concrete slab floor there. Is that over the pink board that we saw in the last slide where Ella is standing?
Correct, yes. So there's the water and electric runners, and then there's the gravel, and then the pink insulation, and then cement.
And those Lego block insulated concrete form walls are going up.
Yep.
How much waste was there from those styrofoam blocks? Like I've seen that process in the works, and I remember maybe like 3 foot long or 4 foot long Lego blocks, and you want to make sure that I'm sure the house is designed to take advantage of the dimensions of that material and not have a lot of waste. How much of that?
Yeah, I don't think they're quite that big. I think they're like a foot and 2 feet. There wasn't very much waste at all. Yeah, I don't, it's been a while. I don't remember exactly, but I don't remember there being much waste because it's, it's just a little block. So then, sometimes you have to cut off part of a block, but.
And how thick are your walls? Look at the space between that interior and exterior insulated concrete form.
Yeah, they're thick. I think they're 18 inches.
Wow. Super, super insulated. And is there just concrete in them, or is there any other insulating material in them?
Well, the styrofoam is the insulating material, and then there's rebar that goes up through the middle, and then the concrete is there to give it strength. The concrete itself isn't very insulating.
Whoa! Yippee! How long did it take from, say, how long was this construction process?
So the longest time was planning. That took a long time. So that took over a year. And then the construction process itself was a little under a year.
Okay, now here looks like prefab roof panels, yeah?
Oh yeah. So you'll notice too, if you go back one slide, so if we're looking at a north wall, there's not very many windows on the north wall. And the windows that there are tiny. And that's another aspect of passive houses, to minimize windows on the northern exposure.
And I'm also seeing up in the upper right-hand corner here, one of the workers is up on a scaffold, and I can see the neighboring house pretty close to you with a awning over their window. How much space is there between your north wall and your neighbor?
I'd say it's about 6 feet.
Not unusual for some properties in the city of St. Louis, that kind of density.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was important for our house to be on the farther north edge of our property so that we could take advantage of the sunlight.
So these are totally prefab roof panels.
Right.
Wow.
Right. They were made, I think, in North Dakota and then brought in on a truck. And then they had a crane come in, and the crane dropped them into place. It was actually a really cold day when they did it. I think it was, like 0 degrees out.
They look like ice cream sandwiches. Is that a solid block of styrofoam there in between the wooden outers?
Right. So it's a particle board on the top and the bottom, and then styrofoam. Yeah. Exactly. Just like what you said, like an Oreo cookie again.
Now, so this is structural insulated panels, SIPs. That's different from insulated concrete forms, another kind of super insulated building material, yeah?
Right. So the SIPs were the roof is made out of SIPs, and most of the walls were insulated concrete forms, but the smaller walls on the second floor, those are with SIPs. It's like prefabbed. And you can send the specs. So Ralph sent the exact specifications to that company, and then they cut it to the exact specifications, and even have little canals where the wires will go, and places to latch things on with the hurricane clips.
It's like kind of a 21st century version of Lustron homes, or those prefabricated homes you used to be able to order from the Sears catalog.
So those are kind of cool. This one, I did learn that if you design your own home, it's a little more expensive than if you get like a prefab one that somebody else has designed. Yeah.
Okay, moving on here. Now we're getting to some of the finishing. Not necessarily stucco or shingle or siding. What's on the side of your house?
Well, it is stucco.
Oh.
So it's the technical name for stucco. I guess the stucco that they use in the Southwest United States isn't so good for the climate here. And so they have a type of stucco that has some acrylic in it that they call exterior insulated finish system, but it's basically stucco for the St. Louis climate.
Uh-huh. And how durable are you finding that in terms of its own structural and integrity, and also in terms of keeping it painted, or what other kind of coating you put on it?
So far, it's been great so far. I mean, it's 8 years. It hasn't had problems. I found one little spot in an underground area that an animal had burrowed into a little bit, but nothing above ground no issues above ground that I've seen.
And in addition to this finish coating, did you paint over it, or did you select a color that it came in that was pre-applied in? It's like reddish orange. Ralph wanted to make it the same color as most of the bricks in the neighborhood. And I think that the outer layer was dyed before it was applied. I can't remember if it was painted or the outer layer was dyed, but I think the outer layer was dyed. Yeah, so that's the color. Interesting. It's a good thing.
Apparently, the guys who did it, they were from Bosnia. And that was before. I've learned Bosnian since then, but at the time I didn't know any Bosnian, so I couldn't talk to them. But apparently there's a lot of people who have this skill from Bosnia.
I have friends who are muralists who could have painted your walls to look exactly like brick. They could have detailed it, so not only would they have been colored, you could still do it, Dan Berg.
See, Ralph is really into the aesthetics. I'm more into the functionality.
Yeah. So let's go inside. Let's take a look inside.
Okay.
Looks like a house.
Yeah, I mean, this is from a while ago, so it's changed a little bit, but Ella has a bigger bed now. Yeah.
And I guess
okay, so I think I'm
gonna. So I noticed there's ceiling fans in the rooms. I find those incredibly valuable as comfort producers because they move air around.
Something else I like about ceiling fans is that if different people wanted a different temperature, then you can if one person likes it cooler, well, you can turn on a ceiling fan in your room and everybody can be happy.
And that doesn't mean you have to moderate the temperature using the thermostat or the climate controls. It means your body feels cooler when it feels, or you can enhance the warmth too in the winter if you reverse the direction of the ceiling fans. One of the things, Dan Berg, I think people always want to know about an unusual kind of building method like passive house, insulated concrete forms, structural insulated panels. It's like, is it going to be weird? Is it going to look weird? And this looks like a regular, comfortable, happy house.
Yeah, I think it's a nice modern house. We made it so that each of us, like, we had a parent's bedroom, 2 kids' bedrooms, and then like a mother-in-law bedroom, and living room, dining room, which is an open space, and then a like rec room for doing things, which actually we used as a classroom for the last 3 months before virtual school ended.
So a few more details about the actual systems of the house here.
Right. And we'll get into it on the next slides.
Okie doke.
So this is that machine that I was just showing you a few minutes ago that pulls in the outdoor air, runs it through an energy conservation system, and then sends out the stale air. And so that's if you have a very tight house. So most homes breathe quite a bit, and putting on more insulation is a good idea because you're so far away from needing an energy recovery ventilator that having your house tighter can only help you. But once you get to a certain level of tightness, then if you don't have one of these, you'll start getting mold and smells and other problems.
Oh, here's your heating and cooling source. Some would call this geothermal. Ground source, actually a better term for it, technical term.
Right. Yeah, so there's a guy, well, you can see that's the drill. They came with a big drill and drilled 100 feet into the ground, and there's a tube that goes down into the ground and then comes back up, and there's water circulating in it, and it's surrounded by a certain type of clay that they put in the hole. And so that that water basically always stays at 65 degrees. And so the heat pump in our house is exchanging heat or cool, depending on the season, with that 65-degree water circulating.
How are you finding that as a comfort control system compared to any other, forced air or radiators or any other kind of comfort control system you've lived with?
I think it's great. I mean, so it is forced air. I mean, so that when it goes into our air handler here, then it blows air around the house. It's a forced air system. And it's just that it's, less energy intensive. So we can heat and cool the house really inexpensively. It works really well with a highly insulated house because you don't need to dig. So the cost of this is in digging the wells. And then the actual heating and cooling costs are very low. Like I said, oh, maybe I didn't say, but like for our whole year, all of our utility bills combined. Well, now that we have the extra solar panels, all of our utility bills combined will be under $300 a year. And so, yeah, it's really efficient.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that I worked in the Earthways home, another building that Ralph Wafer worked on, and that had a ground source heat pump on the ground floor and a conventional gas heating and cooling system on the second and third floors. And that was put in 92 to 94. It was kind of an early installation. And in the years that I worked in that building, it was so comfortable, and you just turned the thermostat a little bit and it was really responsive. You never had to jack it up or pull it down. We never had to do any repairs on that ground source system, using the constant temperature of the earth as a heat source in the winter and a heat sink in the summer. I would recommend that kind of system, well-designed, well-built, installed system to anybody, really. But
yeah, it's worked really well. We had one problem maybe 5 years after it was installed where there was a leak in the house part of it. And I think this can happen with any type of air conditioning system, but there was like a little leak, and so it wasn't working properly. And then a guy came and he figured out where the leak was and replaced that part, and it's worked since before and since. So that's the only problem we've had. Otherwise, it's worked great.
Yeah, we had a lot of these installations take place in the state of Missouri when the ARRA funds came through in the earlier 2000s, and there was some subsidy for that, for people putting them in. But I think it's a better investment when you're putting a ground source heating and cooling system into a new house than when you're trying to retrofit an existing house.
Right. Well, you could do it either way, but it's the way that you can make it so that it's financially worthwhile is if you have a really efficient house. If your house is inefficient, then you have to dig so many wells that it's never going to pay for itself because the wells are expensive to dig.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a lot of energy needs, then it's actually will save you money because you only need to dig like a couple wells, and when I say a well, it's more like a bore. And then you just have much lower heating and cooling costs.
Right. And in that bore, pipes go down, and the liquid, the medium of heat exchange, that's circulating through that network of pipes, yeah?
Right. And they're like flexible pipes, and they're surrounded by a certain type of clay, because the clay is good for dissipating the heat or the cool.
So we have just a few more slides here showing some of the features of your home, Dan, and then we get to go out and see it from the outside. So people can invest so much in windows. And in my experience and my perception, if they're not really well installed, you might as well just have single pane, no matter how many bells and whistles they have.
Right.
But you went with the bells and whistles.
Well, so they were really good at installing the windows, and were very conscious of spraying foam around the windows and keeping them efficient. But yeah, I mean, if I were doing it again, I think, so we have really highly efficient windows. I don't know if I would have done triple pane, because I think in some ways you can save a lot of money if you put on more solar panels and spend a little less on insulation, and you can still be net zero. because solar panels are relatively cheap compared to when you get to a tipping point on the insulation.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's I mean, you know, we're talking to you about this 8 years on living in this house, Dan Berg. Do you think that's partly a cost comparison because of how much solar panels have become less expensive now?
Yeah, I think so. And I think just as a general philosophy, like you, there's a at some point you get limited returns on investment.
Mm-hmm.
So with insulation, you get a lot of return on investment until you get to very high insulation, and then as you add more and more and more, you get limited further returns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So with the windows, having casement windows, it turns out, are way more efficient than having double hung windows. And I hadn't realized that before we built our house, but double hung windows, they often sag after a few years, and then you get a lot of airflow about like where the two panes come together or the two sides come together, and also at the very top because they start sagging. And if you have a casement window, every time that you crank it closed, then it completely seals.
Mm-hmm.
And casement is very preferable from an energy saving standpoint.
Hmm.
And then double pane's a lot better than single pane. Triple pane's a little better than double pane. So we have casement windows, which are triple paned. You know, how much benefit you get from triple pane versus double pane, I'm not really sure.
Yeah. And, you know, window manufacturers, they all have their super green lines. You can go to a window distributor. There's one in Maplewood, Missouri, Empire Supply. You can order windows to your specification, and you can order the different characteristics. So there's a lot of options for windows, but I always want to caution people that the way it's installed is critical, especially in a less super duper ultra insulated house compared to yours.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. And it's important that they spray foam all around the outside of it when it's installed, or else you get a lot of leaking in around the insulation.
Yep. Oh boy, look at that structure. Those overhangs, and overhangs even above individual windows.
Right. So that's, I'm going to show you guys when we go outside again. But the idea is that in the winter, when the sun's low, it goes in through the windows and heats the house.
Uh-huh.
And then when the sun is high in the summer, each window is shaded by those awnings.
Uh-huh. And do you find, you mentioned you hardly have any windows, very small windows on the north side. Do you have them on the east and west?
There are some.
Yeah.
So there are some of the windows you have to have because each room has to have an egress. So there's a couple of the bedrooms need to have windows on the east and the west so that you can escape if there's a fire.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's one room that has to have northern windows so that you can escape.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, there's not really windows on the east and the west or the north.
So then most of your daylighting coming in from the south is moderated by these shades, by these overhangs, to prevent the real intense sunlight in the summer and to let more daylight and heat in the winter.
Right. And in the winter, on a sunny day in the middle of January, the house will heat up to 78 degrees without using, you know, like we might have it set at 70, but it'll get up to 78, even 80 degrees in the house, just because of the sun coming in.
Mm-hmm.
It'll cool off. It'll cool off at night, and then the heat will kick on, you know, around 7 o'clock.
Still need for lighting and doing that really in efficiency with LEDs?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So most of the lights were built in, and they had the wire. So when we bought those the SIPs that are made the roof, they came already with the wiring built in. And then we just had to screw in those lights.
So LED lighting technology has evolved so much over the last 8 years. Are there any things that you would do differently about lighting now if you have been paying attention to lighting development, or maybe you're just enjoying the lighting you have?
Well, our lighting's been great. Like, we haven't had any problems. I think if there was something I were going to do different, I think I would have, instead of having these type of lights that need to be replaced when they go bad, although none of them have had to go bad. And I think they last for like 20 years. So I don't think they're going to go bad anytime soon, but it would have been nice to have like fixtures so that you could just screw in lights. So that way, if they do go bad, I could just screw in a new one. As it is now, if they go bad, it's a big deal to change them. You have to like, unwire them and put new ones in.
Uh-huh.
But they haven't gone bad. I mean, they've worked great.
Uh-huh. So here we are going on to water, solar hot water, solar thermal energy, one thing that we don't talk about as much as solar electric photovoltaic, but you've got it.
Yeah, I really wanted to do that. And I like it. It works great. It's not quite as good of a return on investment as other aspects of the house. So like photovoltaics, solar power, depending on whether you're in Missouri or Illinois. In Missouri, it's about a 12-year payoff. So solar panels last about 30 years, but you're basically buying 12 years of electricity up front, and then after that, it's free electricity for the next 18 years. Solar hot water, it takes longer to pay for itself. Takes about 16 to 18 years. But it's just really cool. I mean, we're making our own hot water, and it's really obvious how it's something that, as somebody who doesn't understand physics that well, I can understand very easily. The sun hits that panel up at the top, and then when the water's hotter in the panel than in the tank, it runs a pump in the tank, so that you can see on the bottom right, that tank is 100 gallons, and it'll get up over 200 degrees on a summer day.
Huh, wow. Would you at this point consider not necessarily solar thermal, but say on-demand water heating powered by your photovoltaics?
I like the solar hot water, truthfully. So most on-demand water heating is with gas, which we don't have gas. You can get electric, but I think they're pretty inefficient. Yeah.
Okay. And here's the electrical source.
So when I made this slideshow in the winter, and they were covered in snow at that time. But
and Straight Up Solar is one of our exhibitors at the Green Living Festival, and we're also having a power hour for Grow Solar St. Louis as a Green Living Festival event, and Straight Up will be a part of that. So this is a 3.99 kilowatt solar array, 17 panels.
Right. And so actually, since this slide was made, we built a carport, and then just earlier this year, I put more solar panels on the carport. So we've doubled that now.
Why did you add more?
I want to get there's a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to be net zero energy, and we were still using, so in like May, June, July, August, we were net zero, but the rest of the year we were still getting bills up to over $100 per month. And so by adding more, we're actually now like net zero. And then also I'm interested in getting an electric car. And so I figure we can power the car. It turns out that if you already have an inverter and you have it all set up, it was pretty inexpensive to add more solar panels. So I doubled the size of the solar array, and it was like less than a third of the cost of the original one.
Probably a lot of people that are viewing this know what an inverter is, but would you just explain that briefly, Dan Berg?
An inverter solar panels make direct current, but our appliances and the grid works on alternating current. And so it changes the direct current to alternating current. And getting an inverter and permits and this kind of thing are one of the main costs of installing solar panels. So if you already have that infrastructure built, then if you add more things on, it's relatively inexpensive.
So you don't need a bigger inverter when you have more panels?
You do, but when we got the inverter, I'd asked them to make it bigger than what we needed so that I could get more panels in the future.
So we'll be thinking more about this in the city of St. Louis, especially because there now is a solar-ready ordinance, part of the new city's energy building code's new energy regulations, that new buildings need to be designed and constructed so that solar can be added to them at some point.
That's great. I mean, so my neighborhood here, we're on a house, and I mean, we're on a hill. Pretty much every house could have solar because they're all south-facing roofs. And within 2 blocks of here, I think there's 6 families with solar.
Wow.
It's growing.
Okay, we're in the home stretch of your slides here. Just a couple more.
Okay, this has actually changed now that I have more solar panels. We're making quite a bit more energy now.
And when your solar arrays produce more electricity than your home uses, what happens to that excess?
We have a bi-directional meter. So during the day when you're making electricity, the house consumes as much as it needs for the refrigerator and the AC and that kind of thing. And then any excess goes back out into the grid and runs your meter backwards. And then at night, when you're not producing anything, the electricity comes in from the grid and runs the meter forward. And then the Ameren tallies it all up at the end of the month and tells you what you owe.
A little bit more detail about that if you want to learn more in our Straight Up Solar exhibitor interview and also in the Grow Solar St. Louis Power Hour, part of the Green Living Festival. Okay, here's the attaboy, attagirl for the Berg home.
Oh, yeah. So we won some awards. It's been a few years, so I don't really remember too well, but
yeah,
these are some awards we won.
But when a homeowner like you and a family like yours invests in a thing like this, sharing what you've done and allowing others to see it and learn about it, that is so very, very valuable. And when we only had, the merest start of conversations about stuff like this in St. Louis back in like the, single digit 2000s, this was a big deal. And now we have a solar incentive program in the city of St. Louis, and not building to the degree, conventional that you have, but thanks for being an example as well as an early adopter.
Oh, thanks.
And then there it is, the Berg home.
There it is. And when we go outside, you'll see the plants have changed quite a bit.
Okay, so let's stop sharing here and pause, and then we'll get Ella and Carlos, our tech crew, and take a little short walk around, okay?
Okay. All right, so now we're outside the house, and I was going to show you a few features of the outside of the house and also the landscaping. The first thing, when you look at the house, we're looking at the southern side of the house, and you can see that the windows most of the windows are facing south, and you can see the awnings. The awnings are shading the windows right now. So in the summer, like now, the windows are in the shade, and in the winter, when the sun is low, that the sun can come in and heat the house. Also, when you look at the house, you can see the big solar hot water panels there. They're angled at 45 degrees, and they're angled that way to take advantage of the winter sun. In the summer, we have more hot water than we need, but in the winter, sometimes we're short, and so those are really angled to take most advantage when the sun's low in the sky. The photovoltaics are at a lower angle, and that's to maximize energy production over the year. And you can see there's also now photovoltaics over on the carport too. Those are the new ones. Okay, so now we're gonna come look at some landscaping features. Okay, come this way, fellow. So when we go out to the front yard, I was trying to incorporate native plants and edible plants. So you can see here's an elderberry here and a 9-bark. And then there's a lot of fruit trees. There's peaches and figs. And out front, there's a serviceberry, which, by the way, you can get the city to put in serviceberries in your strip between the sidewalk and the street. And they make delicious berries, which we've been eating today. There's a filbert here. And then if we walk this way, this is a rain garden here. I dug a ditch a couple feet out from the house and ran the gutters. The gutters empty into the ditch, and then there's native plants that live in the ditch and soak up the water. Let's go this way. Here's some playground equipment. There's a vegetable garden here. And there's a golden currant and a spice bush. This area is a native garden. This is in the backyard. We participated in the Audubon Society Bring Conservation Home program. And this is our, you just leave it there. This is our compost for household scraps. And you can see there's a pawpaw and some milkweed here, some aromatic aster. And now we'll come back over to the house and look at some of the hardware. This is the bi-directional meter for the solar panels. So it's, right now you can see the energy is going out into the grid because it's so sunny out. And right here, this is the inverter for the solar panels, converting the direct current to alternating current. And this is a switch off valve. So if the grid goes down, that automatically shuts off the solar energy so that people on the grid can't get electrocuted. One other thing you can see out here. So right where Ella's standing is where the ground source heat pump water is going underground, and then this is where the pump is. It's just a box, but it pumps the water through the underground tubing, and then also pumps different fluid into the house for the cooling and heating. Okay, go back. So that's look at me now. So that's the tour of our outside.
Wow, thanks very much. It was really fun to see that. And it's great that you have that double lot. You have so much land there for some lawn and some play space and for garden and lots of habitat. You've really made great use of your place. It's beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
Can we see you and Ella and Carlos on the screen? Can you switch over and give us a family view?
Okay. Okay, here, guys. She wants to see all of us here. Oh, wait. Let's see if we can. Oh, there we are.
There you are. The Berg family. Thanks, Dan and Ella and Carlos. And give our regards to your mom and your wife. And thank you so much for showing us your house and telling us about your super energy efficient passive house and how it's doing 8 years on.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Gene.
Thanks to the Berg family of Dogtown in the city of St. Louis for showing us the design and building process of a passive house, not a certified passive house, but built according to those principles, and then showing how that house looks and the environment around it. 8 years on, a growing family and growing habitat and pretty constantly low or shrinking energy bills. From the Green Living Festival at Missouri Botanical Garden, thanks to Spire, our workshop sponsor, for supporting this production and our other efforts. Thanks to Ameren, presenting sponsor of the Green Living Festival. I'm Jean Ponzi from the Earthways team at Missouri Botanical Garden. Thanks to you for viewing and for the green things that you do.